Madana Karuna Pracho Hina Prabhu Kuta Gila Acharya Thakur Ahamura Sarupa Kahasanatan Kahadasaragunata Patita Pava Ahamura Pata Juga Ahakavira Eka Kale Kota Gila Gura Tara Asane Kuti Mata Anale Pashivo Goranga Gunera Diri Kota Gile Pako Sava Sangira Sange Jekoilo Vila Sange Jekoilo Vila Se Sangana Paya Kande Narottamata Anilo Premadana Karuna Pracho Ena Prabhu Kota Gila Acharya Thakur. Jaya Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Jaya 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 Vaishnava Thakur, Jaya Vaishnava Thakur, Jaya Vaishnava Thakur, Jaya Vaishnava Thakur. Jaya Vaishnava Thakur, Jaya Vaishnava Thakur, Jaya Vaishnava Thakur, Jaya Vaishnava Thakur. Oh, Premanande. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj ki. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Tirtha Swami Niti Namane Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Shratatmane Shri Gora Purana Shakti Bhakti Tirtha Swami Niti Namane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Vaishnavanavi Devi Dayate Kripa Bhadaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhurya Yojvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Srimurte Dinatarine Rupanuga Viru Upasya Siddhanta Dvanta Harine. These are the pranam mantras chanted for Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And they're translated as follows. I salute him who is known to the world as His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada, who is of the same status as Lord Vishnu, as his most dear, and is the most dear to Lord Krishna. I offer homage to him whose eternal identity is Sri Vaishnavanavi Devi Daita, one very dear to Srimati Radharani, the daughter of Maharaj Vishnabhanu, who is powerful, an ocean of transcendental mercy, and the deliverer of the science of Krishna. O giver of Srila Rupa Goswami, O giver of Rupa Goswami's treasure of bhakti, which is replete with divine love of Radha and Krishna, I bow to you, the very form of Lord Chaitanya's mercy potency. I offer homage to you, the manifestation of Lord Chaitanya's words, the savior of the fallen souls, and the remover of the darkness of incorrect conclusions that oppose the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami. So we'll start today with our verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in Text, Canto 2, Chapter 5, text 35 and 36 today. So we'll chant. We can the devotees online. We'll just chant the first verse, 35. Just give 1 second as we get it set up here. Narayanam namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirajit nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtuki. Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, one should first offer one's respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto the Goddess of Learning, Mother Saraswati, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart becomes almost completely destroyed, and devotional service becomes established within one's heart as an irrevocable fact. We'll go line by line. Those in the temple room, we can repeat it. Those online, it will just ask you to chant, but on mute. Sa eva purushastasmat andam nirbidya nirgata sahasrav agri bhavak aksha sahasranana shirshavan sa eva purushastasmat andam nirbida nirgata sahasrosh agri bhava aksha sahasrasrana sir shavan sa eva purushastasmad andam nirbidya nirgata sahasro rav agri bhavaksha sahasra nanasir shavan. Please chant if you would like. Sa eva purushastasmat andam nirbida nirgata sahasra ravasha sahasranana shirshavan sa eva purushastasmat andam nirbida nirgata sahasrar agni bhavasya sahasranana sirvashram seva purushastasmat andam nirbida nirgata sahasrar agni bhavaksha sahasranana sirvashram Sa eva purushastasma andam nirbida nirgata sahasrav agni bhavaksha sahasrana nasir vishram. Okay. What we'll do is, since there's another verse, we'll let, if devotees online want to chant the second verse, we can do that. We'll do the synonyms. Saha, he, the Lord. Eva, himself. Purusha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tasmat, from within the universe. Andam, Hiranyagarbha, Nirbidha, dividing. Nirgata, came out. Sahasra, thousands. Uru, thighs. Angri, legs. Bahu, arms. Aksha, eyes. Sahasra, thousands. Thousands of. Anana, mouths. Sir Shavan, with heads also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Lord Mahavishnu, although lying in the causal ocean, came out of it, and dividing himself as Hiranyagarbha, he entered into each universe and assumed the Virat Rupa with thousands of legs, arms, mouths, heads, etc. Purport. The expansions of the planetary systems within each and every universe are situated in different parts of the Virat Rupa, universal form, of the Lord, and they are described as follows. I'll chant it one time, and then if anybody online would like to chant, they can do that. Yashahavai yavai yer lokan kalpayanti manishina katya adi bir ada sapta sapturdvavam jaghanan tibi. Anyone online?
Hare Krishna. Yashe hava yabe lokam kalpayanti manishina katyadivi ada sapta saptodvam jaganadibi. Hare
Krishna. Thank you, Krishna. Anyone else? Okay.
Yasyayeha vaya vai lokan kalpayanti manishina katya adhibir adha sapta saptodhavam jagannadha diha.
यस्येह अव्यवैर्लोकान् कल्पयन्ति मनीषिणः कट्यादिभिरधा सप्ता सप्तोर्ध्वं जगन्नाधिभिः.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Translation. Great philosophers imagine that the complete planetary system are displays of the different upper and lower limbs of the universal body of the Lord. Purport. The word kalpayanti or imagine is significant. The Virat, universal form of the Absolute, is an imagination of the speculative philosophers who are unable to adjust to the eternal two-handed form of Lord Sri Krishna. Although the universal form, as imagined by great philosophers, is one of the features of the Lord, it is more or less imaginary. It is said that the 7 upper planetary systems are situated above the waist of the universal form, whereas the lower planetary systems are situated below his waist. The idea impressed herein is that the Supreme Lord is conscious of every part of his body. And nowhere in the creation is there anything beyond his control. Om Ajnanatimbarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Swapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we'll spend a few minutes on this verse. We're continuing every day on this topic of the creation of this material world by Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma is the secondary creator. Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu is the primary creator. Or Lord Brahma comes from from Lord Vishnu, from the lotus stem coming from his navel. Lord Brahma is born, and Lord Brahma, but also Lord Brahma has a very significant service, in that he is to create and organize this material universe. So this part of the Srimad Bhagavatam discusses the process of creation. Today we're talking about this form called the Virat Rupa, which is known as the universal form of the Lord. And this explains how Krishna, or the Supreme Lord, enters into this material world, and how he interacts in this material world, how he manifests himself. The last sentence of this purport, Srila Prabhupada says that nowhere in the creation is there anything beyond his control. Meaning that Krishna has an understanding and a control over every aspect of creation. Now, one of the there's 2 primary questions, philosophical questions, about God. One is, does God exist? And the other is God available? So, does he exist? One. And if he does exist, is he available? Is he accessible? How do we relate to him? How do we understand him? If you get to part 2 of that question, you've solved the part 1, because if he's available, then he obviously exists. So the idea that there is a personal God, one that you can actually have a relationship with, is sometimes beyond the capacity for the mind to understand. How is it that an infinite being can be understood by a finite person? How can somebody who is limited like ourselves have a relationship with the Supreme Lord, who is the creator of all of everything? How does he have the time? How does he have the interest? Does he even know? How do we have this relationship? How is this even possible? So therefore, there are people that they find it much easier to relate to God in trying to understand Him through His creation, seeing Him in nature. Seeing that the sun is Krishna's, energy, and it says that the sun and the moon are His two eyes. So at no time is Krishna not seeing. We see vivid descriptions in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita of this universal form, of how basically it's this form. And I encourage anybody who wants to study this more, just read through the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and it describes, how He's basically everywhere, and there's thousands of heads and thousands of tongues, and the universes are coming and going, and it's like seeing His form is like the rising of, I forget how many hundreds of thousands of suns. If they were to rise at once, that would be the effulgence. So basically, everything beautiful, phenomenal, magnificent that we see in this creation, in this Virat Rupa, this universal form, philosophers see it as this is God. And it becomes, for them, it becomes a much more relatable way to try to connect. For one who is taken to the practice of bhakti, although they recognize the universal form, this universal form does not allow one to have a relationship of service. So therefore, even Arjuna, who requested to see the universal form, and Srila Prabhupada comments that Arjuna really had no purpose for himself to see this universal form, because he knew Krishna. He had a relationship with Krishna. But he also understood that many people don't have a relationship with Krishna, but they have a relationship with nature. And therefore, if they can at least see Krishna within nature, with this universal form, they can at least establish some initial connection to God. Therefore, we don't focus so much on this. It's here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's spoken about, in order for people who don't have a connection through bhakti, to at least establish some connection, to be able to worship God, observe God, have a sense that God exists in a way that I can at least appreciate. But it is not the end, because it is really just the beginning. From that has to evolve a connection, a personal connection, where one has a relationship, where one can speak to God. One can see that God is not only within my heart, but in the heart of all living beings. And He has a connection with every single living being. And then taking it to the point where one can actually engage in personal service to God. One can chant God's names. One can have a conversation with God. One can sing to God. One can dress, feed, love, and learn about who this Supreme Person is. And that is what we are giving access to in this Srimad Bhagavatam, and the pathway, this bhakti marg, this path of devotional service. It gives us this entrance into the life of God, in the personal life of God. And this was given to us. Well, Krishna Himself came and He displayed on earth, and this only happens once in a day of Brahman, which is an extremely, extremely long period of time. Krishna comes from the spiritual world and descends to this world to display His pastimes. He basically brings the spiritual world down, as if like a traveling roadshow, and brings it down into the earth. And he goes to other universes and does this as well. The Earth isn't unique in that sense. He goes to other places and does this. And then right after that, he comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's significance is to be able to teach how to understand Krishna's pastimes. How do we absorb in it? How do we take part in it? Is it something that we just observe, we read about in the history books? Is it just something that we learn about? Or is it something that we can actually partake in? Is it for us, or are we just observers? And Lord Chaitanya says, no, actually, this is how you engage in devotional service. And he teaches us through his practical example. Has given us entrance into the life of Lord Krishna. Now, the inner life of God, Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, if one is my devotee and one is my friend, he gives access to this. And the example given is like somebody who's a reporter, newspaper reporter, magazine reporter, news reporter. They may have some idea of what the President of the United States does. When he leaves, when he has his lunch, he's traveling to go to another city or another state, they're reporting, they knows when they leave, when they enter, and they know some general aspects of the schedule, what he looks like, did he get a haircut, etc. New policies he's developed. So they know in a general way that there's a president, and he exists, and he has these activities. But if you really want to know what he's like, when he takes off the cap of the president, takes off his coat, and he's relaxing with his family, who are his intimate friends? What are the things he likes to snack on at night? What time does he really go to bed? What time does he really wake up? What's his exercise routine in the morning? What books does he like to read? What type of conversations? Is he funny? Is he very serious? The only people that know that are his family members, the people that live with him, his close friends, people that he brings in, people that he trusts to allow into his innermost chambers. So Krishna says those people are his bhaktas, his devotees. And Krishna says there's no one more dear to me than the bhakta. Shishi Gornitai ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Shishi Radhashard Bihari ki jai. And one reason that the bhaktas are so dear to Krishna is that they're taking up the service of Krishna in this world, of trying to reawaken Krishna consciousness, the lost dormant consciousness of the living entity within the world. And they take great sacrifice. They take great personal sacrifice, and sometimes to their own risk of their health, reputation, so many things. They do that as a sacrifice for Krishna, out of love for Krishna, to try to help people who have lost their way in this world. So today is the disappearance day of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. And he is one of the spiritual masters or acharyas in our Guru Parampara, the chain of disciplic succession that goes from our Guru Maharaj to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's guru is Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's guru is Gaurkishore Das Babaji. After that is Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, then Jagannath Das Babaji, on and on back to Lord Chaitanya, and then from Lord Chaitanya all the way back to Lord Krishna. So he is part of this chain of disciplic succession. So from one end of the chain to the other end are links of the chain. And these chains are interlocked. And the bond that they're interlocked with is the fidelity or the consistency of not changing the Siddhanta or philosophy and manipulating it into their own words. Yes, according to time, place, and circumstance, because they have understood the truth, they're able to apply it according to the time, place, and circumstance. Situation in the times of the 1500s is different than the 1900s. You know, people were different, society is different, so the application is different, but the philosophy remains unchanged. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the life of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. We'll also have a program at 10:30 today, where we'll hear a little bit more about him and offer more glorifications. But for the glorification of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and our understanding, I just wanted to mention a few things. He was born on February 6, 1874, to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and Bhagavati Devi, who was his mother. So his father is one of the acharyas. If we're looking on the altar from left to right, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is the second one over, and his father is the fourth one over. Interestingly enough, when he was born, the umbilical cord that he was born with was wrapped around his body like a Brahmin thread. So this was like an omen. So the Brahmin thread is a sacred thread. When one becomes a priest, it's placed over their torso. So the umbilical cord was wrapped around just like a Brahmin thread. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he took up the service, the mission, to restore Lord Chaitanya's eternal teachings, that after Lord Chaitanya had left, whenever a great personality leaves, and they're a prophet, a saint, an incarnation, and they have so much influence in the world, but when they leave, a lot of times there's a misunderstanding, and there's factions that take place, and sometimes there's corruption due to the vacuum of such a great personality. People just don't know what to do. And this also happened at the time of Lord Chaitanya. When Lord Chaitanya departed, the teachings of bhakti, which he put into place, they became, there were these like dams that put into check the river of bhakti, which he had inaugurated. So there was almost like a dark age of bhakti that took place. And there were this group of, there were groups. One group was called the Sahajas. They took the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which was about Radha and Krishna, and they made it very perverse. They manipulated it, and they didn't necessarily understand the true identity and meaning of Lord Chaitanya's teachings. There was another group called the Caste Goswamis, which basically put forth the philosophy that if you're not born into a particular caste, or you're not born into the lineage of Lord Chaitanya, you really have no right or access or claim to the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya, and you're hopeless. So neither of these were what Lord Chaitanya came to establish within this world. But there was a group of individuals, a group of devotees that did carry forth the teachings, but oftentimes they were drowned out in public by these various groups that were deviant and philosophically deviant. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he took this very seriously, and he wanted to reestablish Lord Chaitanya's teachings for the world to understand. So he prayed for a son that would help him. He realized that I need a lot of help in order to do this. So Krishna, please send me a son that will help me. Bhaktisiddhanta, when he was born, one, the umbilical cord was wrapped around his, that was kind of like a sign or an omen. But also when he was 6 months old, he was born in Jagannath Puri, the original place of Rath Yatra. And the Rath Yatra cart came and stopped in front of the house of Bhaktivinoda Thakur for 3 days. It didn't move. And when the 6-month-old, his name was Bimala Prasad, that was his given name at birth. When Bimala Prasad, his mother, brought him out to Jagannath cart, he raised his arms out to Jagannath right away at 6 months old, looking at Lord Jagannath's beautiful face and reaching out to touch his feet. The garland of Jagannath fell off right at that point. And usually when that happens, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you'll be taking darshan and something will fall off the deities, or the garland may fall, or a flower may fall. It's actually a sign of blessings. And so the priest on Lord Jagannath's cart immediately said, this is a sign that your son is going to become a great devotee of the Lord. So amazing things that happened in his life that just show his greatness, even at a very young age. When he was 4 years old, again, he was just a boy, 4 years old. He was eating a mango, but he didn't offer that mango to Krishna first. So his father, in a very gentle and playful way, he corrected him and said, you have to offer this to Krishna first. You can't eat first. You can't just take it. Everything has to first be offered to Krishna. Of course, we know the reasons why. You have to turn it into prasadam. There's karma, in the food, that if we don't offer it to Krishna, we have to take that karma. Plus, everything we do, everything we eat, everything we give away, everything we offer, we want that to be to Krishna. That is bhakti. So his father, teaching him the principles of bhakti from the beginning of his life, was correcting his son. But he took it very, very seriously. So seriously that at 4 years old, he took a vow never to eat a mango again throughout his life. And he held to that vow. Those of us that have children, you can imagine, they'll tell us one thing and 2 hours later they've already changed their mind. For somebody who's 4 years old to make a lifelong vow to restrain themselves from a mango, which is a delicacy, especially in India. This is something very enjoyable and relishable. So to restrain yourself from that, it's a sign that he's not an ordinary being. When he was 7 years old, he was able to memorize the entire Bhagavad Gita, front to back. And his father, recognizing his scholastic capabilities, began to engage him in proofreading and printing the periodical which he was publishing, called the Sojana Toshini. He excelled in his studies in both mathematics, Sanskrit, astrology, and religious studies. He became well known in the academic circles in the region of Bengal, and he was awarded the honorary title, Siddhanta Saraswati. He was a genius. Essentially, when you read about him, he was a genius. His capability of writing, astrology. This was at a very young age where people would develop this over when they're 40, 50, 60 years old. He was mastering it in his teenage years. He was a prodigy. He did take some occupations, some jobs in various government life, but he had no attraction to it. He realized there was corruption and that there had to be something much more valuable for his life to spend with. He started traveling with his father, he went on pilgrimages, listening to different sadhus speak about Krishna, and that the purpose of life should be to dedicate one's life to Krishna. And then he realized that actually this is where I want to spend the rest of my life. His father directed him. He said, if you want to take initiation, you should take initiation from this Babaji in Mayapur. His name is Guru Kishore Das Babaji. And Gaura Kishore Das, he is the one third from the left of the pictures in the middle. He's next to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He had a very interesting relationship where Srila Bhakti Siddhanta was an erudite scholar. I mean, he mastered Sanskrit, he mastered astrology, mastered mathematics, religious studies, language. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, Srila Gaura Kishore Das Babaji, he spoke very little. He didn't present himself as a very educated person. He lived in a little hut, and oftentimes at different places. Sometimes he'd camp out on the beach somewhere. He would eat just some boiled rice every so often. And sometimes it would be used rice that other people used. He was not into impressing people with his with worldly titles. He was very simple, very devoted, and in one sense, when you look at the two lifestyles, they look kind of diametrically opposed. But he understood through the guidance of his father that this was his Guru Dev. So he went to him and he asked him, he says, I would like to take initiation from you. And Gaura Kishore Das Babaji, he didn't really accept many disciples. So he begged him, please accept me as your disciple. And he says, I can only give you Diksha, initiation, if Lord Chaitanya approves of this. He said, so I have to ask Lord Chaitanya. So Bhakti Siddhanta, so at the time he wasn't Bhakti Siddhanta, Bimala Prasad, Siddhanta Saraswati. He said, okay. And then he went back home. Little time passed. He went and sought him out. And he went to him and begging, did you happen, I'm coming to remind you of our conversation. Can you tell me what Lord Chaitanya's answer was? And he says, oh, I forgot to ask him. He says, I was busy thinking so much about Krishna and other devotional topics, I forgot to ask Lord Chaitanya. Thank you for reminding me. But come back again some other time. So he went back home, a little time passed, he came, and again he asked, did you happen to speak to Lord Chaitanya? And did he approve of you giving me initiation? And he says, he asked Lord Chaitanya, and all Lord Chaitanya stated was that erudition is extremely insignificant compared to devotional service to Lord Krishna. And that's all he said. So now he's like completely bewildered. He's like, what do I have to do? And I'm trying my best. I'm trying to serve the Lord, and I feel you're my Guru Dev, but at the same time, I'm not getting a straight answer. But then he remembered Ramanuja Acharya. He had to visit his guru 18 times, and he kept getting passed up before he was given initiation. So he was convinced. He says, this is only a test that the Lord is giving me to show that the relationship between guru and disciple is not a cheap relationship. It's not one that the disciple deserves. It's by the grace of the guru which one connects the disciple to Krishna. And he says, I will wait as long as it takes until Lord Chaitanya gives you the clear signal that I am to be your disciple. I will wait as long as it takes. And then hearing that Gaura Kishore Das Babaji, he realized that he was a qualified disciple, and he gave him initiation. And upon initiation, he gave him this instruction. He said, preach the absolute truth and keep aside all other works. So all your other academic, scholastic accomplishments, it's now time to keep them aside and dedicate your God-given gifts solely to the service of the Supreme Lord. Now, he was a lifelong brahmachari. He didn't marry. And then he became a sannyasi, which is the renounced order of life. So throughout his life, he was extremely strict about himself and lived very strictly. An example of this was in 1905. He took a vow to chant 1 billion names of the Lord. 1 billion. Just to give you an idea of what that would be. He would chant 3 lakhs. 1 lakh is 58 rounds, or sometimes it said 64 rounds. You know, we chant 16 if you're initiated. So he would chant 64 rounds 3 times every day. And he did this for 9 years and 4 months. He sat in a hut. Daily, he took 1 meal of boiled rice. That was his meal. And sometimes people would come to see him. He would talk to them, take some time to talk to them. But he was in a very secluded place in Mayapur, kind of in a jungled area. And for 9 years, I mean, imagine if you could do that for 1 day, maybe 2 days at the most. He did it for 9 years and 4 months continuously until he reached 1 billion names. So every month, it was about 10 million names he got to. Again, not an ordinary living being. You can only imagine the spiritual, when he came out of that 9 years, the spiritual strength, the conviction, the absorption. And he put his body through a lot of austerity. So sometimes he would put black pepper on his rice just to help him with nausea of the bodily discomfort that he encountered. Again, not an ordinary living being. Coming out of this, he took up his father's mission of trying to establish Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And he became powerful. He was known as the Lion Guru, or the Nrsimha Guru, because he was able to use his powers of debate, his scholastic capabilities in the service of Krishna, and present Krishna consciousness in a way that would defeat, in a very convincing way, the misleading teachings of the caste Goswamis and the Prakrita Sahajas. They were very upset, especially the caste Goswamis, that Bhakti Thakur was basically saying that anyone can become a Vaishnava. And not only that, anyone can become, who's a Vaishnava, can then become a Brahmin. And they felt that this was going to ruin the social structure of the time. That no, this idea of being a Brahmin, this was hereditary. You can't qualify yourself to become this. And actually, a Vaishnava was less than a Brahmin. So he wrote a book on this. The book is available. And he presented this. So they wanted to have a debate about it. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was getting ill at that time, he sent his son to represent the teachings of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And he presented it. And he actually won the debate. He was victorious. This took place around 1911. Between 1918 and 1937, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati He founded 64 maths or temples, Gaudiya maths, including one in London and one in Burma. Significant for us as members of ISKCON and followers of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada met Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur for the first time in 1922. Srila Prabhupada was a young man at the time, and his friend basically drug him, convinced him to come and see this sadhu in Calcutta. And upon their first meeting, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur told Srila Prabhupada, he says, "You're an educated young man. Why don't you preach the message of Krishna all over the world?" And at the time, Srila Prabhupada was a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, and he was committed to serving Mahatma Gandhi's cause, the movement to liberate India from British rule. So he said, first we have to get things right at home. First we have to get the politics of India settled, and then we can work on spreading the teachings of India, which, you know. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's response was very straight, very cutting, and it spoke to his determination. He was not worldly at all. He said, "The message of Krishna cannot wait for a change in Indian politics. It is not dependent on who ruled. The teachings of Bhagavad Gita are so important, so exclusively important, that it cannot wait." In other words, there's always a time in this world where there's always going to be one power in charge, one party in charge, one, regime in charge. There's going to be sometimes one country occupying another country, and sometimes that country will gain its freedom, and then another country may come in, and maybe that country will take the independence of another country. This is going on, and it's gone on ever since the beginning of time. And he's saying that will never end. So don't get wrapped up in that. However, the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita actually give you the purpose that actually can help you free you from all these material designations that are keeping people stuck in this material world. Srila Prabhupada, he only met him several times. He went to see him on pilgrimage. He wrote him several letters. In his last letter, only a month before Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur left this world in 1936, Srila Prabhupada wrote him a letter. I'll just read it briefly of what Srila Prabhupada speaks about it. He says, "In December of 1936, I wrote one letter to Guru Maharaj. I knew that he was kind upon me. So I wrote that, Guru Maharaj, you have so many disciples. I am also one of them. But they are doing direct service to you. Some of them are brahmacharis, some of them are sannyasis, but I am a householder. I cannot. Of course, I was giving sometimes some monetary help, but I could not give any direct service. So I asked him that, is there any particular service I can do for you? So that letter was replied in the 13th of December, dated 13th of December, from Jagannath Puri. And he passed away on December 31st. So a fortnight before. So the reply was the same as he wanted me to do this preaching work that he told me about in 1922. When I first met him, he said, you try to preach whatever you have learned from me to the English-knowing people in English. That will be good for you and for the people for whom you shall preach. That is my instruction. That instruction Srila Prabhupada took throughout the rest of his life, and then eventually manifested when he came over to America in 1965. A few days before the disappearance of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, he called his disciples and gave them some final instructions. These were his final instructions. With the utmost enthusiasm, preach the message of Rupa Raghunath. This is the 6 Goswamis. These were the direct followers of Lord Chaitanya, who left behind many of the books on Bhakti. So preach within the utmost enthusiasm the message of Rupa Raghunath. Our ultimate goal is to become a speck of dust touching the lotus feet of the followers of Rupa Goswami. All of you remain united in allegiance to the spiritual master, Ashraya Vigraha, in order to satisfy the senses of the transcendental entity of non-dual knowledge. So he encouraged his disciples to remain unified in the sole purpose of serving Lord Krishna. Sometimes this happens when people become divided, but the unifying force is to keep Krishna in the center. So he's encouraging his disciples, don't become divided and go after control. Keep Krishna in the center as the supreme controller. Do not give up the worship of Hari, even amidst hundreds of dangers, hundreds of insults, and hundreds of persecutions. Do not become unenthusiastic upon seeing that the majority of people in the world are not accepting the message of Krishna's sincere worship. Never give up the glorification of the topics of Krishna. They are your own personal bhajan, and your all in all. Being humble like a blade of grass, tolerant like a tree, constantly glorify Hari. In the early hours of January 1st, 1937, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur passed away from this world and entered into his eternal Leela back in the spiritual world with Lord Krishna. So, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj ki jai. These are some of his pastimes. There's so much more to speak about, to read about. These are just a very few highlights. We'll talk a little bit more at 10:30, if you can join us. But we owe a huge debt to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. His role in this worldwide movement, which was originally the vision of Lord Chaitanya, and then Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his father, he understood that this is meant for everybody, all beings, all walks of life, all castes, all creeds, all denominations. And he had this vision that one day, all people from all different countries would come and join hands and chant Jai Sachinandana Gora Hari. To get to that point to where that would actually take place, the establishment of a Krishna consciousness movement was forming. And the role that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur took in establishing the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya, writing that down, preaching it, and then giving the instruction to Srila Prabhupada and the empowerment to Srila Prabhupada to cross the oceans and come and start this Krishna consciousness movement with no help, no physical help at all, at the age of 70. You can just see the divine arrangement of Krishna, how it all worked out. In 1922, he received that instruction. And that was the beginning of what we know today of our international society. But it all came from the power and the strength of Bhakti Siddhanta and the vision of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and their commitment to the mission of Lord Chaitanya. Hare Krishna. Yes.
And the question is about Bhakti Siddhanta. So, did he create Gaudiya Vaishnavism? Did he create that, or is it part of it? Did it exist before? That's what I don't understand. And I know, you know, it was something that came up for me. Did he create it?
Right.
Or was he a part of it because it was Chaitanya's mission?
Right. So Gaudiya Vaishnavism is the terminology of those that follow Lord Chaitanya. So there's Gaudiya Math. These were established, by him and his father, of essentially establishing temples throughout India.
And the word Gaudiya means directly.
It's a good question. Gaudiya, I've always understood to mean followers of Lord Chaitanya. We can double check on that. We can see. I mean, if Parikshit Prabhu or any of the devotees on here may be able to clarify the exact term Gaudiya.
I mean, for some reason that came up for me today, even though I've been around for a long time. Everything you said about Siddhanta or Marge, it made me want. I was like, go ahead.
Let's see if they have.
Krishna Parikshit Prabhu, are you there?
Or Prananath Prabhu, maybe. I don't know if they may not. They may not still be there. But yeah, so it references those that are followers of Lord Chaitanya, because there are different branches of Vaishnavism.
I'm still here, but I'm sorry, I was just trying to unmute. And I was having a hard time doing it.
The question came up about this specific term, Gaudiya.
Gaudiya, yeah.
I always understood to be followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but I don't know if there's a more specific definition of that you know of.
Checking, no, but I checked online because when I heard it, I said, well, as you're talking, I'll just go see what's been said. And Gaudiya refers to the Gauda or the Gaudiya region of Bengal. That's what been written there. Because Vaishnavism means the worship of Vishnu. So basically, Gaudiya Vaishnavism is worship of Vishnu as was done by those in the Gaudiya region of Bengal. That's what's basically written here.
Yes, Prabhu. That's my understanding as well. It's Hare Krishna. It's Prananath Das. Gauda Desh, we hear this word all the time. So it's the West Bengal where Lord Chaitanya appeared. So that's why it's also the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So Gaudiya actually refers to that place where Lord Chaitanya appeared. Followers.
About specifically then his teachings, his philosophy, as referenced by the place. Yeah.
And that makes
Thank you,
it even
Prabhu.
more special that his disciple, Srila Prabhupada, took that and traveled with it to actually take it out of a specific area, which you kind of did. That shouldn't have spoken about it. He took it and brought it to the world, which is the mission of Lord Chaitanya, which is the difference, well, not even different, but shows like the origin and then the mission. Is what I get out of it.
Very nice. Dr. Tom?
I had a question about the verse from the bottom.
Sure.
When it says great philosophers see the Vira Rupa as imaginary, how should we understand that? Is he referring to like great philosophers as in like Vaishnava philosophers or like mundane speculative philosophers?
Let me go back to the verse real quick. Pull it up. Oh. So the question is that in the going back to the verse, it says, great philosophers imagine that the complete planetary systems in the universe are displays of the different upper and lower limbs of the universal body of the Lord. It's imaginary, because it's not an eternal form. It's really how they imagine the Lord as different parts of the material creation. Of course, our imagination is also a product of Krishna allowing us to have these ideas. So Krishna allows us to relate to him in this way. So these aren't like, although the universal form, as imagined by the great philosophers, is one of the features of the Lord, it is more or less imaginary. So the great philosophers, it's not like the Vaishnava or devotee philosophers. It's more the what we consider to be the speculative philosophers, who are trying to understand who God is, using their own minds or imagination. And therefore they envision God within the universe in this way. Sure. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Anybody online would like to
Permit me to add
either
a
ask a
little bit, just
question
a little
or
bit to it.
state anything about Srila
Hare-
Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur?
Oh, Bhakti David is on. Maybe he should speak first.
Half-day fast, so we can go breakfast.
Oh, thank you, Hare Krishna, Prabhu Janadas. I just wanted to ask a question. The book you were reading from at the beginning, what was that book with the prayers?
So there's a book of Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhava. It's a 3-volume set on the life and teachings of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If you can see that picture.
Yes, thank you very much, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Is that the
I think
one
we
about?
have here at the temple, if you are interested. I think we may have a couple.
Is that the one Bhakti Vikas Swami wrote? Is that the one?
I'm sorry?
Is that the one written by Bhakti Vikas Swami, compiled by him?
Yes, yeah, it's written by Bhakti Vikas.
Okay, I thought so. Okay. And by the way, the universal form, if you don't mind me adding one thing to it. So this is part of the material manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's, the different parts of the Lord, I mean, the different incarnations of the Lord are all permanent. But the universal form is not, because when the universal form, when Lord Brahma goes to sleep, the universe is gone. It's gone into the pores of Mahavishnu. So here goes the universal form. It's disappeared then. That's why it's not. permanent, it's temporary. Because it doesn't stay like all the other incarnations of the Lord are always present. That is one distinction between the universal form and all the other incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's why devotees are encouraged to stay with the permanent form of the Lord, especially the two-handed form, which is the most intimate form of the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for that clarification and explanation. It makes a lot of sense. Anyone else before we conclude? Thank you all for your attention and your participation. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj ki. Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Jai.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Dronacharya Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Nice class.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Have a wonderful day.
Jai.